So it is my distinct pleasure to introduce somebody I think you'll enjoy hearing from, and a great friend of mine, Billy Gouveia. Many, many years ago, Billy Gouveia hiked the Appalachian Trail from Georgia to Maine, and he'll tell you about that, as a 19-year-old after his sophomore year in college. He now spends much of his time indoors as the founder and CEO of Surefire Cyber, a digital forensic and incident response firm. He brings 20 plus years of experience in cybersecurity, technology leadership, and strategy consulting. Before the corporate sector, Billy spent a decade in the U.S. intelligence community and served as a U.S. Army officer. He holds a BA from Columbia University and an MA from Georgetown University's School of Foreign Service. A longtime resident of Summit, Billy still hikes as often as his family and professional responsibilities allow. So my great pleasure to introduce Billy Gouveia.
Good morning, gentlemen. Terry, thank you for your gracious introduction and, more importantly, for your kind invitation. It's a thrill to be here today. I have the privilege of speaking a fair bit. Normally it's about boring things like cybersecurity. This is actually the first time I've ever given a discussion about the Appalachian Trail, and I do want it to be just that, a discussion. There's many different characteristics. I'm sure most of you are familiar with the AT on one level or another. Perhaps some of you have hiked portions of it. Perhaps there's another thru-hiker here in this room, in which case, please join me up front. But what I want to touch on today is really two fundamental things. Why do people hike the trail, and what do they learn from it? And so I hope that by sharing my experiences with you, I can help unpack this a little bit. And I'll begin with a little bit of background about the trail and some of the logistics, and then I have sort of a page for each state to touch on some highlights. But I really want to invite your questions along the way. And I know that this is a topic which is only engaging to the extent that you engage me in talking about it. And before I go any further, I do want to thank Joel for his great help on the audiovisual side. Hopefully I can continue to keep the ship on a steady course, but I appreciate this very much. So Paul, I'm so glad that you shared your experience celebrating New Year's Eve at Pinkham Notch. And I was thinking about my memory of that spot. And 30 years later, I remember so many intricate details of those 100 days that I spent on the trail. And I remember how scared I was at that moment. And I'll tell you why. The hardest thing that I encountered along a summer of perhaps one might call it voluntary suffering wasn't running out of food because the James River was overflooding and I couldn't get across it to get my resupply. It wasn't getting dehydrated in the middle of Pennsylvania in multiple 100-degree days. It wasn't the many, many rattlesnakes I encountered, or the one time I was hiking at night and actually collided with a black bear who was equally as surprised as I was. It was actually on Mount Washington and I believe Mount Washington still maintains the record for the highest wind speed measured on planet Earth. And weather started coming in very, very fiercely. And I was a very scrupulous hiker. I wanted to touch every single step of the trail. And, to stray from the trail for any reason took an awful lot of doing. And so I stubbornly pursued, the top of Mount Washington, and the weather got worse and worse and worse. And I started seeing other tourists run down. I thought, tourists, I've been out here for a couple of months at this point. And then I realized that I was in real trouble. And so I ran down and I found my way to Pinkham Notch. And I went inside and my head was spinning. And this woman looked at me and said, "Are you okay?" I said, "I don't know." She goes, "Well, let me buy you a bowl of soup." And that woman, her name is Josepha Peterson. She and I will trade Christmas cards next month. And I think that story hopefully captures two real lessons. One, doing hard things, particularly as young men, can help us figure out who we are and help us derive lessons about how to do difficult things. The second is there's magic on the trail. And one of the most notable things when fellow hikers get together, it doesn't matter if they're thru hikers or not, they don't tend to talk about the marvelous sunrises. They don't tend to talk about, um, the days in the rain. Tend to talk about the moments of kindness that they encounter. And the Appalachian Trail is particularly renowned for this notion of trail angels and trail magic. And that might just be, kids having a lemonade stand with free lemonade for hikers, somewhere at a trail crossing in North Carolina. Or that guy who's at a weird spot in his life and is looking for connection. And so his fun Friday night is sitting at a trailhead handing out beers to hikers. It might be, the people in front of me in line smelling me at a convenience store and buying me an ice cream. And it might be Josepha Peterson buying me a bowl of soup, which just made such a difference to me in the moment. Not just for the sustenance it gave, but I was really pretty keyed up and pretty shaken up. So I'm so glad to have that memory of Pinkham Notch to turn back to. And hopefully, as I talk about my own experiences, I can further unpack why people hike the trail and what they learn from it. So does that sound good, gentlemen? All right, great. And how many of you have stepped foot on the trail? Oh, that's awesome. All right, great. So look forward to talking about that as well. What's that? A half mile's worth? Yeah. Joel is roughly 4,000 times smarter than I am, right? So well done. Well done. All right. So here's the trail. You can see I don't say it starts in one place and ends in another. There's actually a lot of different ways to hike the trail. My experience, I was a northbounder, so I started in Georgia. Luckily, when I flew to Atlanta, no one was throwing toilet paper down on me from 23 stories. And I hiked in a very consecutive linear manner up to Maine. So I was chasing this mystical Mount Katahdin, which is the northern terminus of the trail in Maine, for every step of my journey. Others, start in Maine and head south, and others flip flop, and we'll talk about that as I go for a set of reasons. So, just some background on the trail. The trail, by the way, was conceptualized 100 years ago this year. So yesterday in the mail, I got my regular magazine from the Appalachian Trail Conservancy celebrating 100 years. And I haven't read it yet, but I popped through it at breakfast quickly. And it was just fun to see, the trail's history captured in so many different ways. But it was really founded and formed as an idea of helping an industrial society just coming out of World War I reconnect with the spirit of nature. It's not a wilderness trail. There are many, many road crossings. You're never more than notionally 100 miles from help at any time. But most of the trail, here in New Jersey, you can go get a soda anytime you want on the Appalachian Trail, right? And that's true for a lot of the central part of the trail. And I know some of these numbers are a little bit tough to see. The trail is just shy of 2,200 miles long. So it gets a little bit longer every year as they rework certain sections and try to bring the grade down and make it a little bit safer. But I think my hike was 2,170 miles. Now it's 2,180 miles. So the crew that set out this past summer had 10 miles harder than I did. But I would say it's steeper. It takes about 5 million steps, like the Appalachian Trail. And northbounding, you're gaining about 16 Mount Everests in elevation. So I'll show you how the Appalachian Trail compares to other long distance trails in the United States in terms of the grade and the steepness of it. Again, I know this is a little bit tough to see. Roughly 3 million people, and including many of you in this room, including Joel's half a mile, go to the trail at every year, which is pretty great. And roughly a few thousand try to thru-hike it every year, and roughly a few hundred finish their thru-hike every year. There are about 250 shelters along the way. I have a picture of one or two. And so every 10 miles or so, there's a shelter that you can stay in. And thousands of people work to maintain the trail every year. And when I talk about trail magic, there are times when you just see this crew covered in sawdust and mud. And you think, wow, these people are taking their weekends and they're in some cases, a week vacation to come out and dig up roots and cut down trees out of the way. The storm that hit near Asheville, North Carolina, a year ago, triggered this enormous influx of energy to get the trail back open again. And it's amazing, to have the opportunity to say thank you to these trail crews. Every weekend, I could hear a chainsaw and know. A lot of times I wouldn't know what day it was, but when I heard a chainsaw, I thought it's probably a weekend. It's probably a Saturday, and someone's out here helping us do this, which is really great. So that's kind of next level trail magic. It's a great thing to give someone an ice cream. It's an even better thing to have someone build a trail for you to go hang out in. Yes, sir. And I'll repeat the questions for anyone on Zoom, but we'd love to hear. It is. Yes. The question was, is the trail open in North Carolina where the hurricane went through? It is indeed. It was closed for about a month, and I think of having to reroute your through hike that you planned so elaborately. Uh, but they very quickly rerouted it, and there were some sections of there is this sort of official sanction from whoever can give such a thing that if you take this alternate route or hitchhike around it, um, it'll still be considered a through hike. There's not a sense of this real badge or anything like that, but the trail is marked very carefully by these white blazes. So think of a 3-inch tall by 1-inch wide splash of paint. You'll see some in the pictures I show here. There are about 80,000 white blazes along the way, and what they did is they moved the blazes officially, and now it's back to more or less the original trail. I understand they're still doing some cleanup stuff, but I really appreciate the question, and also extra sticker for you for asking the first question. But the stickers for everybody, so hopefully, and they're fictional stickers. But yeah, you got it. You got it. That's it. That's it. So in terms of the elevation profile, you can see in the southeast with the Smoky Mountains and the Shenandoahs down here in the lower left. It's pretty tough going at first, right? And then in the Mid Atlantic, we don't have the same uh, mountain ranges. The highest point of the trail is Clingman Zone in the Smokies. It's about 6,000 feet. And then when you return to New England with the White Mountains, and then if you look to the very end, Mount Katahdin there is straight up. It just looms over the horizon. You see it from 100 miles away, and it is this just majestic, stunning goal. But you can see, well, it's difficult to see. I can see that it goes nearly vertically on this chart, and it feels that way when you're hiking it. I mentioned how many people try to through hike in a year. So this chart here is a bar graph. It's just up and to the right. So my year, I think there were about 1,000 people that tried it, and about 100 people finished it, and I got to know many of them. When I was reflecting on my discussion today, I was thinking, what has changed the most since 1995 when I had this idea and now? And the answer is cell service, right? And so now there's not this sense of stepping away from your family, from your home. You can sit at home and track people's hikes on Instagram, and that doesn't mean there's service everywhere, of course, but it's a lot more accessible, and I feel like there's probably a good and bad dimension of that. But one of the things it has done, and I think this spiked after COVID as well, is really increased the number of hikers on the trail. And so now there might be 5,000 people trying it every summer, and again, roughly 500 or so finishing it. So it's been a lot more demand on the trail. This chart here, there are 3 great American long distance trails: the Appalachian Trail, the Continental Divide Trail, and the Pacific Crest Trail. The Appalachian Trail is the only hiking only trail, and it's the longest hiking only trail in the world. And you'll see, well, again, for every mile of horizontal distance, there's about 220 feet of vertical change in the AT. That's nearly twice as rigorous as the Pacific Crest Trail, which was graded for horses and things like that. So sometimes people will say, I've talked to people who've hiked all 3 trails, and the discussion is, they each have their own challenges. This is not me flexing and saying it's the hardest. I think it's fair to assert that the Appalachian Trail is the most rigorous long distance trail in the world, and that was certainly my experience. Continental Divide Trail is different challenges. Navigation is very difficult there. The Pacific Crest Trail, you're above the tree line, so contending with the sun and the elements in a different way. But I just think it was so fun to set out to do something hard when I was a 19-year-old trying to unfold my wings and figure out who I was. All right. In terms of gear, I do want to mention I did not bring a cell phone with me. I don't think I'd ever seen a cell phone in 1995. None of the pictures here are ones I took. I don't think there actually is a picture of me hiking the Appalachian Trail except at in Harper's Ferry at the Appalachian Trail headquarters. When you walk through there, they take a picture and file it away. But I think that was it for the whole summer, which is something I'm grateful for because I'm pretty sure I looked as bad as I smelled after a couple weeks on the trail. But so I pulled a bunch of pictures online to kind of guide our discussion here today, and you'll see, people have a bunch of gear. And there are all kinds of discussions around gear. One of the first thru hikers on the trail, Earl Schaefer, said, choose what you bring very, very carefully. And that's certainly something I took to heart. Um, I cut the handle off my toothbrush. My wife still sometimes points out if we're in a hotel with that, I use about this much toothpaste. Um, weight is everything, right? And an ounce in the morning feels like a pound at night. And so a lot of times people start out with a gear list like this young lady's, and then give stuff away, send it home, things like that. So, I didn't carry a tent. I started with a stove. I gave up on a stove. I just ate room temperature food or whatever the elements gave me. I didn't carry boots. I just hiked in sandals because they were lighter. The most important piece of gear of mine were socks. But, you have to carry a couple pounds a day of food. And so if it's 10 days between resupply, that means 20 days of food and plus water. That's a couple pounds. And if you're trying to cover a lot of ground over rigorous terrain, every pound of other stuff you don't need to survive really matters. So, I bought a map in Georgia, and by the time I got to the next state, I was like, I don't need a map anymore. This is my home. I can follow these white blazes all the way to Maine. And so, I think I ended my through hike with less than 10 pounds of gear other than food, right? And speaking of food, the average hiker consumes 4,000 to 6,000 calories a day. I'm pretty sure I was not at the 4,000 calorie end of that. I was going pretty hard because I just had one summer off from college. And so I knew I had 100 days to hike the trail, so I was going to hike the trail in 100 days. Now, if you think about the time, you think about roughly 2,200 miles of trail to cover, and then the fact that you need to resupply, so that's a half day off every 10 days to get into town and pick up food. And I'll comment on that in a moment. That meant that I was really covering about 25 miles a day. And so that'll go through 6,000 calories like that. I remember walking into town some days, having a whole large pizza by myself, and then eating a gallon ice cream, and then thinking about what I was going to do for dessert. And, you know, it's the other thing, and now is as good a place to mention this as any. It's as social or as isolated an experience as one wants to make it. So I remember my first night on Springer Mountain, right? I flew to Atlanta, hitchhiked to the trailhead, walked 6 miles to the start of the trail. And I'm still bitter about having to walk 6 miles to get started on this thing. And lay there alone all night, thinking that every spider was a black widow, every sound was a rattlesnake. And surely armed gangs were going to jump out and get me. And then, and so I never felt as lonely as I did that moment. But then there are times where you'd meet up with, other through hikers or other section hikers or other people just out for a weekend. And you walk with them for a couple miles and just share some stories and stuff like that. There are times where I'd spend, better part of a week hiking with someone. And I still think of these people today. One of the dimensions is you don't talk about your real life too often, and you adopt a trail name. And so there are people that I think of, and I mentioned how rich the trail is in my memory, and I think about, oh yeah, hiking with this guy or that lady. And I remember their trail names. I have no idea what their real names are, and seldom do I actually know anything about their actual lives. But we shared a big part of this experience together. Yes, sir. Sure. So trail names, I guess like call signs in the military or something like that, they're sometimes self-selected, but often bestowed by others. So because I was 19 and my name is Billy, I ended up as Billy the Kid. Um, that's not the most colorful name. I kept trying to shed it. I also had a habit of trying to help people carry stuff. So I was also referred to as Sherpa a little bit. If I saw a member of the Summit Old Guard out trying to climb Katahdin, I'm like, hey, let me help you with your pack there, no problem. So there are trail names that they're generally G rated, but there are some really rich ones out there. I'll try to process that a little bit, but I was always a little bit disappointed in mine, so I'm sorry that you asked. No more sticker for you, sir. We'll see. We'll see. Thank you. Thank you. Any other questions? I do appreciate it. All right, let me just keep moving here. So trail life. So I mentioned the term voluntary suffering, and this is about average, right? In fact, my feet look like that probably into North Carolina. I remember the first time my toenail fell out, I was worried. I was like, oh, next time I get into town and I call my mom and dad, should I ask my dad, about toenails falling out? And then I met a southbounder. He's like, you're ridiculous. And about a month later, I had no toenails at all left, and blood on my feet at night. That was routine. You see the duct tape there. Duct tape. When people ask me how many pairs of socks I'd wear, it'd say, well, it depends on how much duct tape is on my foot at the time and stuff like that. So, blisters, hangnails, just stubbing your toes. They're just a constant risk, and one that you generally forgot about after about a month. After I finished the trail, I didn't actually have sensation returning to my feet fully for at least a month or two. You see this person getting some water here. There are some pumps and some springs along near shelters and stuff like that, but one of the constant things hikers would talk about is where's water, right? And one of the ways that we communicated was in each shelter, and you'll see an example of a shelter there. There's a journal, and you write in there, Billy the Kid stopped in, did not, 19 miles from this place. I'm trying to shoot to that place tonight. Hey, southbounders, there's a really good source of water 4 miles south here. Keep an eye, it's on the left. Um, I saw a mama bear and her cub, like very, very detailed, insightful notes. That was kind of my style. Other people would just write poetry. Some people would talk about, where to get marijuana, all kinds of things. You have a rich cross section of life, for sure, coming to play. And it's also one of the ways where you get to know people. And, I remember reading some entries and be like, wow, this guy knows every single Led Zeppelin lyric, and I'm about a day away from catching him. I can't wait to talk to him about this, right? Um, or hey, she sounds kind of crazy. When I cross paths with her, I'm going to keep walking, right? Uh, so there's some of that. Uh, so we'd always be trying to share insight on where water was and things like that. And also trading food was a pretty typical thing. Since I didn't have a stove for most of my hike, um, I didn't have much leverage in the barter game, but so it goes. Travel light, freeze at night. But you see someone here just getting some water off a rock and then probably treating it with either filter or iodine or something like that. So that's pretty typical. This is also pretty typical. I'm not going to comment too much on this. Every now and then there'd be a proper outhouse with a little bit of privacy, but there's some discussion of streaking earlier. You know, you're sleeping next to strangers in shelters. You're Everyone smells terrible. It's very much a shared experience. And for me to walk by and see a middle-aged woman doing her business, I say good morning, and just keep walking. It was very, very normal thing. There is a tradition to hike naked on the equinox or summer solstice. I'll not indulge in any further discussion about my own experiences on that day. But last comment, you see the shelters here. That's a fairly typical set of shelters. And for those of you that have been on the trail, I think these are either from New York or New Jersey. I don't recall. Some of them are fairly palatial. Some of them are more rundown. I think I have some examples as we go, but that's where I'd sleep at night if I needed to. Sometimes I'd roll up and I'd see a bunch of scouts taking up a shelter, and I think I'm just gonna keep going, and I'll just sleep on the trail. A few times I get waken up in the middle of the night by rain or some animal who's interested in checking things out, and I just get up and keep walking. I had a lot of ground to cover, so um, I was always happiest on the move. Any questions about trail life? None. Great, thank you. Yeah, yeah. So again, most nights, probably 90% of the nights, I'd sleep in a shelter. There were times I'd go to bed under a sparkling night of I'd not go to bed. I would lie down in the middle of the trail under a sparkling sky of stars, and then like why does this sound like thunder, right? And then just get up and keep sharing. But that only happened a couple times. So and generally I would do that if I either got overly ambitious, right? And yeah, I have 10 more. I'm gonna try to get 10 more miles, or it'd be like, hey, that mountaintop, that'd be a great place to sleep if it's a clear night. So it'd be kind of fun. And then high mountain weather can get challenging. Yes, sir. The question is, why did I decide to take this venture on? I've had 30 years to think about that, and the honest answer, good sir, is I have no idea. Um, yeah, let me. I'll answer that in just a moment. What's your question, sir? The question is how much the trail is on private land? Very, very little. And that's changed quite a bit. The Appalachian Trail Conservancy has partnered with various state, local, and federal governments to make much of the trail off of private land. So it covers, I think, 6 national parks, several dozen state parks, things like that. And the when I talk about the trail getting longer, a lot of that is just rerouting it. I spent, I think days in Virginia and Pennsylvania are the worst in terms of like walking across cow fields um, and just climbing over barbed wire and then um, sort of dealing with that. So they tried to find spots to move the trail, and that's why it got longer. But it's I think I believe the Appalachian Trail Conservancy has a goal of getting it completely off private land within the next few years, which is great. Yes, I want to answer the question about why I hiked as well. But yes, Paul. Yeah. Hmm. Yep. The question is, are any sections of the trail still along roads? Um, Only by design. So there are 3 towns that the Appalachian Trail goes right through. You'd follow the White Blaze right into town. So Damascus, Virginia, Harpers Ferry, West Virginia, and Monson, Maine. But yeah, I remember, talk about. I began by commenting on your memory, but the scariest moment on the trail. I mean, some of the worst risks I made were when to run across Route 81. Right. Luckily, there's a bridge there now, and everything else. So the other thing you'll see or you'll hear about is people walking on roads to avoid unpleasant sections of the trail. So I commented on the white blazes that mark the entire Appalachian Trail. There are blue blazes for side trails. So you might have to, you might say, hey, there's a nice spring up ahead. There's a blue blaze trail that's a quarter of a mile, and you have to make a decision on whether it's worth taking a half-mile detour to get some water or not. There are also some people that will hitchhike enough that we call them yellow blazers because they're constantly, on the road hitchhiking and things like that. So luckily, you don't have to walk on roads if you don't want to, with those three exceptions. So, yes, sir. Yeah. Yes. Yep. Yeah. Thank you. So the question is about the shelters being documented. One great thing about the trail is that the shelters don't move. So, I knew very little about the Appalachian Trail, and I'll come back to the question of why I hiked this in a moment. I'm just going to move off this picture of the porta potty. I find it a little bit unpleasant. There we go. So when I set out, I looked at the book. I realized how much time I had, and I just sort of plotted out. All right, I'm going to try to make it to this shelter. So I had a plan for really the entire hike, and then I asked my dad to mail me food to certain towns along the way. So I'd say, "Hey, Dad, mail me 10 days of food, please, to Irwin, Tennessee, and then I'll call you from there and let you know about." We always had sort of two stages ahead, and I'll call you from there and I'll let you know where to send the food after Damascus. And so I was constantly talking to people about that, but I did have a plan for every shelter along the way. And if you, uh, I think my experience was a little bit unusual in that I had such a tight schedule. Um, Most people, I think, would, and certainly the ones that I encountered, would just kind of wake up and walk north with a far simpler sense of things. And I think it's good and bad. I mean, I definitely rushed through some beautiful stuff because I was on the move. A lot of people would just start out with saying, like, "Hey, I'm just gonna head north and see where it goes." And one of the great things about this experience, just the simplicity of the day to day, right? You think like, um, we're all sitting here knowing that people are trying to get a hold of us a dozen different ways, right? People are lighting up your voicemail, your email, people are texting you and all sorts of stuff. And you have all these responsibilities, stuff like that. My responsibility every day for a whole summer was to get up and walk north. It's pretty great. Pretty great. So what? Oh, yes, sir. Mountain bikes are not, no biking is allowed on the trail. I mean, allowed being a loose thing. I don't recall ever seeing a ranger outside of the national park. People certainly did bike, but it is a hiking only trail, so it's pretty rare. There was a question that came in from Walter online, and I'm gonna ask for Joel's help there. All right, so why did I hike? I had I was a scout, and I had the opportunity to go to Philmont, New Mexico, and do a 10-day backpacking trip, and that really changed my life. And actually, want to share with you, gentlemen, I got to go back to Philmont with my son, and I give Terry credit for inviting me to be a assistant scoutmaster and participate in that joy all over again. I had a terrific scoutmaster as a kid, and he invited me. I think I was about 15. He invited me to go on a 100-mile canoe trip with a bunch of guys up in Maine, and there was some problem with the logistics, and we went for a little hike, and we walked to a shelter on the Appalachian Trail, and we were goofing off, and some really smelly guy shows up and goes, "Kids, quiet down and move out of the way." And I just looked at him like, "Who are you, man? Like, where'd you come from?" He goes, "Georgia." Whatever, you're crazy. And I just ignored him and went on with my life. And then my sophomore year of high school, I'm sorry, my sophomore year of college, um, I ran into a bit of a health challenge. I was lying in the hospital, and my dad sent me clippings from the Boston Globe. I'm a native son of Boston, and he sent me articles with the Red Sox and stuff like that. And on the back of one of them was an article about the Appalachian Trail. And I read it and I realized, oh, that crazy guy really did walk from Georgia. When I get out of this hospital, I'm going to go try to hike the Appalachian Trail. And I believe it was the second backtracking trip of my life, right? So the first one was to Philmont, and then this was my second one. And you can imagine what my parents and my family thought about this endeavor. They're not the most outdoorsy crew. They were like, What do you mean?" I said, "Look, it's my last free summer. I was an ROTC cadet in college. I knew after my junior year I'd be headed to Fort Bragg, back when it's called Fort Bragg, before it was renamed and then became Fort Bragg again, um, for officer training and airborne school and stuff like that. So I knew I just had this one window, and I knew I didn't have to worry about internships because I was head of the Army afterwards. So I just reflected, like, I have this opportunity to do whatever I want. And why I want to do that? I was trying to figure out who I was. And that's the truth of it. And this just gave me the space to begin to get my arms around that question. And I don't think I knew that at the time. I think it just sounded like a cool thing to do. Um, Now, why do other people hike the trail? That's as individual as there are a number of hikers, right? The first man to thru hike the trail, Earl Schaefer, was a World War II veteran, and he said it was to walk off the war. He did it with his dog, and there's a statue of them somewhere along the trail. Um, when I've gone back to the trail, my experiences since my thru hike have been pretty limited. But when I've gone back to the trail, particularly in the sort of 2007 to 15 stage, I saw a lot of veterans. And you'd read articles about this amputee hiking the trail, or um, people walking off the war. That's certainly the theme. A lot of people going through pretty triggering life events. Um, One of the famous thru hikers, Grandma Gatewood, wrote a book. She hiked in like Ked's shoes with her shower curtain as her ground liner and stuff like that. She she said her grandchildren were driving her crazy, and she just wanted to get out in the woods. Okay, maybe that hits home. Her book is terrific, by the way, Grandma Gatewood. Other people, you see them going through layoffs, divorces, just trying to get some headspace to process stuff. Um, the other young people that I encountered on the trail tended to be not so caught up with the schedules of college, right? And so there are a lot of people who are, well, I don't know if the term gap year existed then, but that was definitely a thing. Um, and there are people that just um, someone here remarked someone in their family grew up next to the trail. So there were definitely people that grew up with the trail as part of their lives and felt that call from an early age. I would say don't ever through hike the trail knowing as little as I did when I set out. Um, when I got a ride to Springer Mountain in Georgia, and that's actually Earl Schaefer at the start of the trail and that plaque there. Um, I had no idea what to expect. I was tremendously underprepared, but here I am to talk about it. So, yeah,
Yeah. I really like your talk. I was actually 3 times on parts of the Appalachian Trail, not really hiking the trail, but in my youth, I was up on Mount Katahdin on the knife edge, which was kind of
yeah,
impressive. And in college, I went with a couple people to uh, to camp along the Appalachian Trail. And the interesting thing, I had a book that said there was a lean-to shelter, and I bought a book in the 70s, and it said exactly where the lean-to shelter was. And when I went there, I found out it burnt down in 1952 and was never replaced.
so I'm corrected, Walt. The shelters do move. I apologize.
And 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 then this summer, actually, I was on the Mohawk Trail, and there's a way station for the Appalachian Trail there. So there's 3 times
Yeah.
I've been there. But the question I have is, you know, uh, well, I read the book for about these people that did the Grand Canyon because it was part of Old
Mhm.
Guard
Sure.
Book Club, and they commented that it really, I mean, the two things you mentioned was the weight of your pack and your shoes and your feet, you know.
Yep.
But the question I have really is I've hiked in the Alps with my uncle, just a day trip, and he never used poles, and I saw the poles. I was wondering, are you using the poles to hike? Do most people use them to hike, or what's the story there?
Yeah, great. And if I might ask you a question before answering yours, are you in the woods at the moment?
Uh, no, that's just the background,
Oh, okay.
shot.
All right. All right. You had me. I was envious. Um, there were people that used poles. I think there are a lot more. I did not during my through hike. They're a lot more common now than they were. But a month ago, I was out in Denver. I'm sorry, I was out in Colorado, and I summited a 14er, and I'm glad my poles were there with me. So I'd say the if I were to plot the use of hiking poles and the age of knees, there'd be a really tight correlation. So yes.
So, well, we're sort of running out of time, so it's a little bit discussion. So when I was Googling you yesterday,
Oh dear.
and also the Appalachian Trail to find photos to put in the blast email that I sent to everybody the day before, I did discover you were a 2,000 miler and that your trail name was Billy the Kid.
Okay.
But I also discovered there's another Gouveia that is a 2,000 miler,
Really?
Susan Gouveia in 2017. I was wondering if she's related to you.
That's a great question. I do have a cousin, Suzanne Gouveia, and there's absolutely 0% chance it's the same person. But yeah, yeah. Thank you, Paul. If my wife throws me out for any misdeeds over the Thanksgiving holiday, I'll have to go find that through hiker. Presuming I'm not related to her. That's great. Yes, sir. The mic is right there. Okay.
Thanks. So I've belonged to a couple of hiking clubs in Morris County.
Great.
One of which is connected with the county Parks and Recreation, and we did the hiking of the entire New Jersey section.
Yep.
So one notable feature you may want to comment on is apparently New Jersey has one of the steepest climbs.
Yes. Coming out of the Delaware Water Gap.
Yeah, and in addition, it's not for the faint of heart, a lot of it. Some of it's easy, some of it's tough.
Yeah. It's very rocky, and just the steepness, as you point out, coming down into the Delaware Water Gap, and then I think back then I had to pay the toll to walk across the bridge. I don't think that's the case anymore. I might still owe someone 50 cents for it or not. Hopefully, if you're in this room, I'll settle up later. And then climbing out, I did that. I did that same stretch a couple years ago with my son, and I was not too proud to ask him to carry my stuff. So, but that's a great hike. It's just beautiful too. I mean, the payoff for the views is terrific, right?
If I may, we had some comments from the birthday boys about memorable New Year's Eves.
Yep.
Do you have a most memorable event time when you were on the trail?
Too many. It would really be a succession of kind of holy moments. Let me take your question and, without disregarding it, answer a slightly different one, right? I talked about why people tend to hike the trail and also what they learn from it. So let me come back to that, what we learned from it piece, and I think it'll answer the most memorable thing. One of the questions that we have to answer in forming our lives is about the goodness of humans, right? And I certainly encountered my share of selfish people on the trail. I remember there's a trailhead in Tennessee. Some guys threatened to beat me up and take my stuff, and I was like, my stuff? Like my granola bars? Like what is this? There's unpleasantry anywhere, but again and again and again, I encountered people with a helpful heart. And if I draw anything from my experience, it's that, right? I was given this sort of master class in how good people are, and not always, and not all of them, but by and large, there's an awful lot of goodness in this world. And so when I think about my favorite moments, it's Josefa buying this shivering, scared kid a bowl of soup. it's a fellow hiker recognizing I was having a tough day and picking me up a little bit, right? And so it's sharing the sunrise with someone I met 3 minutes ago, but because we had a common experience, we could connect over that. It's really just seeing the beauty of this world that God must have loved us so much to allow us to live in, and having the experience of spending a summer just rejoicing in it. So, do I have one memory that stands out? No, I have 100, and that's why I'm here talking about it 30 years later. And
Yes.
hopefully, I'm not ducking the question, Rich. Hopefully, okay, all right.
Can you
Jim?
hear me?
Yes,
Can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. As background, there's a high school in Newark, St. Benedict's. It was founded by the Benedictine monks about 150 years ago. In 1967, Newark riots occurred. The school had been mainly for middle-class boys from the suburbs. After the riots, and Benedict's was right on the edge of where the riots were, as a result, the school had to close because the people were reluctant to send their children down there. And they decided to hit on or develop an inner city school, basically focusing on the disadvantaged. And when the school reopened, it closed for about a year, reopened in 1972. One of the things they hit on was these children really didn't have any exposure to things like an Appalachian Trail. They integrated into the program at the end of the freshman year. The entire freshman class goes out in groups of 7 and hikes the Appalachian Trail for 4 days or so as a bonding experience. And it's continued on for over 50 years now, and it's one of the central aspects of the overall educational process that they have. And just one little aside, there was a golf tournament, and there was a guy from CBS at the golf tournament, and somebody came up to him and they said, "Why don't you do a feature on St. Benedict's?" And the CBS guys, "Oh, we get all these requests all the time to put people on the CBS." But he sent a group out, and they went to Benedict's, and they went once or twice, and then they went out to the Appalachian Trail. And they were out on the Appalachian Trail following this one group, and there was this one kid that couldn't make it, and the others wouldn't let him quit. And when CBS saw that, they said, "Okay, you're on." So they ended up featuring St. Benedict's and its experience on the Appalachian Trail on the 60-minute television program.
Thank you. I think ending on Jim's comment about the experience of sharing the trail with inner city kids is a great place to end. I really appreciate the questions that I received. I'm laughing about the gentleman commenting on the minutes. Hopefully, REM levels remain stable throughout our time together today. But that was great, and hopefully, I've given you a sense of the spark of joy that the trail can bring and what it meant to me. So, thanks so much for the time.
Billy, thank you for a really engaging discussion, and thank you for everybody with the questions. I have the pleasure of presenting to you a certificate of appreciation from the Summit Old Guard. And I'd like to ask for a Summit Old Guard salute. Thank you so much.